Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blogging Theology. And today I'm delighted to welcome back Dr. Louay Fatoohi, an author and researcher in Islamic studies and comparative religion. You're most welcome, sir. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. Thank you very much, Paul. And it's always a privilege to be back on your outstanding channel. And thank you for your service to Islam and Muslims.
Alhamdulillah. Well, thank you for coming back because this is a very important and topical podcast today. But before we come to that, just for those who don't know, Louay is originally from Baghdad in Iraq, and he reverted from Christianity to Islam in his early 20s. He has a PhD from Durham University here in the UK and has published extensively on Islamic studies and is particularly interested in comparing historical accounts in the Quran with their counterparts in the Jewish, Christian and other sources. He's an expert on that. He is also interested in comparative Abrahamic religions in general, tafsir, that's Quranic exegesis, the historical Jesus, and Sufism. Now, on social media, I often come across the view that the Bible says God has given the Holy Land to the Jews, and this claim is often used as a justification for the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. You can see this on Twitter and other social media platforms all the time. But who actually owns or has the right to the Holy Land? While the Quran agrees with the Bible that God gave the Holy Land to the Israelites, it rejects the biblical claim that Allah gave it to them for perpetual ownership. This temporary lease of the land was linked to the function and task for which the Israelites were chosen by God. When that chosenness ended, the assignment of the land to the Jews also expired. Unlike the Bible, which makes the Israelites the focus of history, the Quran does not make the Holy Land the exclusive ownership of any one ethnicity or group of people. It also rejects the biblical claim that the Israelites are a holy people, as it does not consider any ethnic group to be holy. These issues will be explored in the usual scholarly manner by Dr. Louay in this podcast, inshallah. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for this really a summary of what we're going to talk about. So as everybody knows, the Holy Land is a major topic in the news. It has been for more than a year now in the most violent way, but it's been in the news for decades for probably less kind of violent way. But again, it's a very controversial topic. It split people, split countries, so it's a very controversial and difficult topic actually to tackle politically. Even though the problem is really straightforward, is one of occupation, basically, settler colonialism, that's all. There isn't much about it. Now, a lot of people have written about this subject, and a lot from a variety of angles, historically, politically, about the geography, everything about it. And there isn't, and the question is, so what else to say? Now, I'm not really interested in rehashing what other people have said. I learn from other people, but I speak only when I've got something new to say, some contribution to make. And the difference in this particular presentation is that I will be focusing on the foundational text of Islam, the Quran. Everything else springs from the Quran in Islam. And my focus there, so if somebody is interested in more kind of the political history of it, there are a lot more people who've done all kinds, including on your fantastic channel, who are far more equipped, furnished, and more of experts on these subjects than myself. And people can consult those. What I'm going to focus here only on the Quran, and I'm going to try to contain the discussion so we don't really kind of find ourselves going elsewhere, because it's very tempting to go outside this particular scope. So what I'm going to cover here is what the Quran says about how it describes the Holy Land. What does it say about it? Also, it's in terms of ownership, locating it, where is it exactly, the function of the Holy Land, what is holy about it, and why is it a special land? These are the questions that I'm going to deal with. And because I'm going to focus on the Quran, there will be quite a bit of linguistic analysis and dealing with terminology and concepts of the Quran. I'm going to obviously presume that the viewers don't know Arabic or don't know much Arabic. So I'm going to explain everything in detail. And to help me with that, I'm going to use slides just to make it easier. So things are on the screen, people can hear and see what we're talking about. And please, Paul, do let me know when I'm not explaining something clearly enough, because there are places that are really intrinsically difficult to explain. I'm going to try my best. We will see as well as we do that the Quran ultimately corrects the narrative found in the Bible. Yeah. This particular representation, I would also like to say, it really can be seen as another episode in the 3-4 other episodes I've done on related subjects. These include the exceptionalism of the USA, the chosenness of the Israelites, and also the Abrahamic covenant. And we will be quickly referring to these other videos as we go through this particular video. There will be quite a bit of ijtihad, and I'm going to share with the viewers what traditional scholars say, and I'm going to try also, when I have a contribution to make, I will also make this clear, so people can then make up their mind. There will be a couple of places where we're going to deal with some Quranic subtleties. So we'll try to bring to shed light on this, what looks like hidden gems really in the Quran.
Good stuff.
So the Holy Land is described in the Quran with two specific terms. One is derived from the root baraka, blessing, baraka. It's and then the other is muqaddas or qudsiyya or holy. So these are the two terms that refer to the Quran, and I have translated them here as a blessed. This is Mubarak. So Mubarak is a very common word. We use it always. Eid Mubarak, Jum'ah Mubarak. It's used quite a lot. Mubarak is the masculine. The feminine is Mubaraka. And so these two words that we're going to go through. And we will start with the first term, Mubarak, or blessed. So this, the land, the Holy Land, is described as a blessed in 4 different verses. We're gonna now, I'm gonna present these in the chronological order of the events they refer to. Okay, just to make it easier to follow them. So the first verse, وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ وَلُوطًا إِلَى الْأَرْضِ الَّتِي بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا لِلْعَالَمِينَ. This verse refers to Abraham, and we delivered him and Lot, who is believed to be his nephew according to the Bible, but clearly he's a relative, as we conclude from the context of the Quran, to the land that we have blessed, barakna fiha, for the world or the peoples. Now, this particular term, barakna fiha, or we have a blessed, occurs also in the other, in another 2 verses. So 3 out of the 4 contain this particular expression, barakna fiha. So this is basically occurs in the context after Abraham left, after his people wanted to kill him, and then he left. There's a story about that. The Quran tells us the story there, and then it jumps to this particular place in history. The second one, the second verse, وأورثنا القوم الذين كانوا يستضعفون مشارق الأرض ومغاربها التي باركنا فيها. Same expression. We bless it. And we have made the oppressed people inherit the eastern and western parts of the land that we have blessed. So we have blessed here again the same land. The context of this particular verse is after the Israelites were taken out of Egypt by Moses. So right. The first one talking about Abraham, and then the second one is talking about Moses having taken the Israelites out of Egypt. The third one, this is now talking about Sulaiman. وَلِسُلَيْمَانَ الرِّيحَ عَاصِفَةً تَجْرِي بِأَمْرِهِ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ الَّتِي بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا. And to Solomon the wind blowing forcefully, proceeding by his command towards the land that we have blessed. بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا. Again, the same expression in the three verses. So the last one is slightly different. This is actually from the time of the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله. Exalted is he who took his servant by night from al-Masjid al-Haram to al-Masjid al-Aqsa, whose surroundings we have blessed. So these are the four places where this term is mentioned, and the land is described as a blessed land. Allah blessed the land. So what does that mean? I mean, so blessed it as in what? What happens? Now, blessed, obviously in all these terms, the reference is religious, spiritual. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala must be talking about something spiritual about the land. He's not talking here about the produce. He's not talking about the plants of the land. He's talking about something spiritual, because the context of this use is specifically talking about the prophets and about their mission in the context of referring to this land. However, the word blessing, blessed or blessings, and the root isn't actually used specifically only for the land there, nor is it used only for spiritual issues or spiritual matters. The root actually occurs 32 times in the Quran. So as you can see, only 4 of these are actually about the land we're concerned with. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to look at the other usages of this particular term. And I should mention here the word mubarak or mubaraka, feminine, is what's known in Arabic as ism maf'ul, or passive participle in English, passive participle. So moving on to the other usages of the term is used to with reference to Allah as Tabarakallahu Rabbul Alameen, for one instance. Blessed be Allah, the Lord of the worlds. Now, this occurs 9 times in the verbal form, and all of them are a reference to Allah, and it is used as an intransitive verb, so it has no object. Allah is the subject, is not the object of the verb. So tabaraka, as if it's an action that Allah takes. It's something that he does. It's not that it's something that is done to him, as opposed to the other usages. So Allah is not described as blessed by somebody or someone, whereas the other things, etc., we're going to see, are described in this way, as blessed. So just to confirm, used 9 times for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this particular form. Now, the meaning of blessed, something blessed, means that is a source of good for others. That is the general meaning. So when you say something is blessed, that it has been made to be the source of good for others.
Right.
Allah is here used in the verb used with Allah because he is the source of all good. That's the reason why it occurs only in verbal form with the word Allah, and the verb is intransitive. It has no object. It only has a subject, and the subject being Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah, and if you look at some of these verses, including the verse I'm quoting here, Tabarakallahu Rabbil Alameen, is the ending of a verse, a longer verse that talks about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creation, what he created, and then it ends with Tabarakallahu Rabbil Alameen. So that's kind of the general meaning. The Quran is also described as Mubarak, Kitabun Mubarak, and this is a book we have sent down blessed. It's described as Mubarak 4 times in the Quran. There's one other instance where the night of the revelation is called Mubarak as well. So the Quran is also Mubarak. Then there are a group of people also 4 different times referred to as blessed. So one, for instance, the one verse I chose here is about قِيلَ يَا نُوحُ اهْبِطْ بِسَلَامٍ مِنَّا وَبَرَكَاتٍ عَلَيْكَ وَعَلَىٰ أُمَمٍ مِّمَّنْ مَعَكَ. It was said, that's after the deluge, after the Noah was rescued with others. O Noah, descend with peace from us and blessings upon you and upon nations descending from those with you. This verse applies the term blessed to Nuh and some of his descendants. There are another verse that applies the term to the family of Abraham, another one about Abraham and Isaac, and his family in general, and another one that's applied to Jesus. He describes himself, وَجَعَلَنِي مُبَارَكًا أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُ. He made me blessed wherever I am. So what we've seen so far, application of the word to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the Quran, and to people. Other places are also described as blessed. So it's not only the Holy Land, no. The house that was built in Mecca by Abraham to become the destination of pilgrimage and worship of Allah is also described as Mubarak. Inna awwala baytin wudi'a lin-nasi alladhi bi-Bakkata mubarakan wa hudan lil-alamin. Indeed, the first house of worship established for mankind was that at Mecca, blessed and a guidance for the world. So the description here is applied to Mecca, the house of worship there. It's also used for the place where Allah first spoke to Moses. That spot is also described as a blessed. I don't have the verse here, but that's another. And there's another reference to some villages Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala referred to as Barakna, as in we blessed. And these villages are not identified, but they occur in the context of talking about Sheba, Saba. So what we've seen so far, you can still continue with this earlier slide. The earlier slide spoke about the use of this term to describe the Holy Land. All of these usages are still spiritual, but like I mentioned earlier, the term is actually generic. Look, for instance, at this verse, وَنَزَّلْنَا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً مُبَارَكًا. So it says, and we have sent down a blessed water. Why is it blessed? Because as a result of water, there is life, and life is good. So, and then the same the term also used to describe other things. For instance, it describes the earth in general, and also describes even greetings. The greetings Muslims are instructed to, and that's because it's good. These greetings are the source of peace, friendship, and of the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam said in one of his sayings, "Afshu salam," so extend greetings. Extend greeting each other is good. So the bottom line of all of that, what I tried to show is that where the word Mubarak is used to describe the Holy Land, how it's used to describe other religious, spiritual contexts, but it's also a term that is generic and used in other kind of worldly context, if you like. So Palestine is not the only thing or even the only place that described as a blessed. Other places and other things are also, but it is blessed in the spiritual sense of the word rather than in the worldly sense.
Okay.
The second is that clear, Paul, so far?
It's very helpful, actually. Thank you for sharing that. That was very insightful, actually. Very clear.
Now, the second term is Muqaddasa. This is more difficult, more subtle. And I have translated that as holy. Other people might try sacred or other terms, but really the translation doesn't really tell you much, which is why we need to talk about it and to explain what it actually says in the Quran. First of all, I should mention that a lot of exegetes equate this term with the word Mubarak. So they would say Muqaddas means Mubarak. Now there's a saying in a kind of in Quranic studies that goes something like الاختلاف في المعنى يعني الاختلاف في المبنى. Sorry, اختلاف في المبنى يعني اختلاف في المعنى. Difference in spelling, let's say, means difference in meaning, or difference in wording means different in meaning. So generally speaking, most exegetes would think that if you have two different words in the Quran, you cannot say they're exactly the same. The connotation may be different. There might be some overlap, but usually the different words tell us something extra or different, which is why they're used differently. I also accept this as a principle in the Quran, even though, like I say, at times the overlap between different terms is actually significant. Now, like Mubarak, Muqaddas or Muqaddasa, the feminine here, is also a passive participle. Passive participle. It's important also. When I said that exegetes often, not all of them, equated with Mubarak, also they give meanings along the lines of why is it Muqaddasa? It means no evil. It has no evil. The land. Because it's the land of the prophets, because it's pure, These are the kind of ijtihad reasoning, a kind of personal reasoning that exegete scholars usually do in order to try and understand the meanings of the Quran. One difference between this root, Muqaddas, which is derived of Qudus, QDS, if you like, in English. So the one difference between this root, this term, and the other term, Mubarak, is that this is used less than a third as the earlier term. So there are only 10 places where it is used. So let's look at the first one of them, which is the main concern for this presentation. This is Moses speaking to the Israelites after he has rescued them. يا قوم ادخلوا الأرض المقدسة التي كتب الله لكم ولا ترتدوا على أدباركم فتنقلبوا خاسرين. O my people, enter the holy land that Allah has assigned to you, and do not turn your backs for then. Don't turn back, for then you will become losers, or you will lose God's support. So that verse clearly is describing the holy land, or the mubarak, the blessed land, with this particular, like I say, more kind of subtle term. The two other places describe the place or the valley where Moses was first spoken to by Allah, also as muqaddas. The difference between, like I say, muqaddasa is feminine, muqaddas is masculine. So this is the place where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called to Moses and commissioned him to go back to Egypt and become prophet, and everybody knows the story. It's twice used in the Quran to describe Al-Wadi al-Muqaddas, the holy valley. So that's 3 times used in the Quran. Like I mentioned, it's used actually 10 times in total, whereas the Mubarak, the root for Mubarak, 32 times. The other important use of the term is as one of the beautiful attributes of Allah. It's called Al-Quddus. Al-Quddus. It occurs twice. There are 2 places in the Quran where there's a listing of a number of beautiful names, and Al-Quddus is mentioned in these 2 places. Al-Quddus. Now, the Al-Quddus occurs, like I say, twice. It's only Allah who is described as Al-Quddus. The second thing to note, that I hope be of some use for people who don't know much Arabic, but even people actually who are familiar with Arabic might not know this. This is called Sighat Mubalagha, exaggeration form of the word. So when you have emphasis on the meaning, it comes in this kind of, it's a form of hyperbole, effectively. That's the kind of description of it. Exegetes, so what do they make of Al-Quddus? It's actually a very difficult term because it's one of Allah's beautiful names, and it's difficult to connect. So it doesn't occur in some kind as part of a sentence, if you like. It's difficult then to try and understand what it exactly means. You have to kind of try and explain this term, but just looking at it itself, maybe relating it to other instances of the root, but it doesn't occur in a context where it's associated with a verb or a particular action, for instance, to try and. So what did they, exegetes usually say? Again, at times they say it's similar to Mubarak, which as I mentioned, they are actually different terms. At times they say it means it's a form of glorification and a form of affirming that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unique. There's nothing like him. There's no one like him. So it's a form of what's called in Arabic tanzih. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is effectively kind of rejecting any likening, any suggestion he has peers, and suggestion that he, all of these things. So he's the absolute and ultimate unknown to us. So that's how it's taken usually. Some exegetes have linked it to have said it means al-kamil, or perfect. So this is what it means. These are opinions, I mentioned them, but the reason I created this slide is that trying to show everybody what we could say if we then kind of link all these verses together. And then it used 4 times in this expression, Ruh al-Qudus, the Holy Spirit, 4 times. And what I would like also to note here is the structure because in English doesn't really come out clear. Ruh al-Qudus is what's known in Arabic mudaf and mudaf ilay. I think it's translated as possessor and possessed by. So al-Quds is linguistically talking here. Possessor, and then al-mudaf ilay, and ruh al-mudaf. Possessed by, so it's in genitive usually form, al-Quds, because of the structure. So 4 times, and this is usually taken to mean Gabriel. There's almost kind of agreement on that. The Jibril is Ruh al-Qudus, 4 times mentioned as Ruh al-Qudus. Now, exegetes try to kind of explain what does it mean to relate Ruh, which is Jibril, to Al-Qudus. So what is Al-Qudus? And opinions here again differ, but some people have said Al-Qudus means Al-Quddus. It's just another word, but not in the exaggerated form. So he is the Ruh of God. You know, that's, others said Al-Qudusiyya means Allah. Again, kind of try to say the same thing. Others said Al-Qudus means purity, tahara, purity in Arabic, tahara, and others still equated it with baraka, blessing, baraka or blessing. But like I say, this is completely understandable because of the context of this term. So you have kind of to make some assumptions. Now, one thing we know about Gabriel is that he's associated with the delivery of Allah's message. We know that. He conveyed the revelation to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. We know that Jesus is described in the Quran as being aided by Ruh al-Qudus. Helped by Ruh al-Qudus, but he is associated, of course, with the revelation of the Quran. Then we have another instance, the last instance out of this. So Al-Qudus twice, Ruh al-Qudus 4 times, the Holy Valley twice, and then Al-Ard al-Muqaddasa, the Holy Land once, and then the last one is a verse when after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the angels that he was going to create new creation, referring to Adam, part of what they said is that as they were inquiring what that meant, why that was going to happen, they said, وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. They are contrasting what they do with what was going to be committed by this new, it's called a species, not necessarily referring to Adam, but the people who will descend from Adam. So they went saying something like, we glorify you by praising you and extol your holiness. This is really difficult to translate here. I went with extol your holiness, just to emphasize just to put that the word holiness occurs there. And it is not, very important, it is not, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the structure here is not the object of the action of the angels. It's not the object of it. But it looks like the angels are describing something they do that's connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being Al-Quddus. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being Al-Quddus. Now, I mentioned what exegetes have said, and admittedly, a lot of exegetes would say, you give more than one opinion, quote others, because like I say, there's an element of ijtihad there, and inevitably, it has to be there. But the most would say that Al-Quddus means that it's unlike anything else. The thing is, if you want to follow the principle that I personally always follow when I study the Quran, which is Al-Quran yufassiru ba'dahu, or the Quran interprets itself, which is an established, of course, principle. It's mentioned, accepted. In fact, if you look at Muqaddasa fi Usul al-Tafsir, introduction to the principles of tafsir by Ibn Taymiyyah, he lists actually this particular principle first, even before relying on other kind of traditions. So now, if you look at all of this, what kind of thing we can conclude? My view is that muqaddas, in all the ways it's used here, it's related to Allah's, call it, presence or revelation in some way. الأرض المقدسة is muqaddasa because this is the land that witnessed prophets and revelations like no other land witnessed. Al-Wadi al-Muqaddas, the holy valley, was there because that's where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to Moses. Ruh al-Qudus, Gabriel, Jibreel, he's mentioned as Ruh al-Qudus. Now he's associated with the kind of transmission or delivery of revelations. We know that. Angels also are messengers. Well, that's what the word angel mean originally, of course. They're messengers. There's actually a verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described them. جَاعِلُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ رُسُلًا, making the angels messengers, which is interesting because, like I said, this is actually etymologically, this is what the word actually meant. And then we have the Al-Quddus, being Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So my conclusion here is that Al-Ard Muqaddasa, like the Wadi, the valley, was Muqaddas simply because that's where it witnessed those activities of revelation by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like no other land did. That's really kind of what I think it means. There's a very interesting hadith by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which I find supportive of this understanding. Sayyidah Aisha reported that the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam used to pray, to say, while in his kneeling and prostration, he would say about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Subbuhun Quddusun Rabbul Malaikati wal Ruh. Subbuhun is again an exaggeration form, meaning Subbuhun is the subject of tasbih, glorification. That's what it means. Quddusun is the same word here without the article, al-Quddus, Quddusun. And then the Prophet continues to say, Rabbul Malaikati wal Ruh, the Lord of the angels and the Spirit, Ruh. And the link that I see specifically in this hadith seem to obviously link to the verses here to establish or confirm or lend support to understanding Al-Quds, Al-Quddus as relating to that activity, divine activity that happens with when there is a revelation, etc. Now, to compare these two now, Mubarak and Muqaddas, blessed and holy, as we've seen, Mubarak, blessed, means something that is a source of good for others. Muqaddas seems to become Muqaddas in connection specifically with those divine activities. Very specific divine activities related to messages from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The word Mubarak is used to describe in the Quran for in spiritual and worldly contexts, not only in spiritual matters, whereas the term Quddus or Muqaddas or holy here is actually used specifically for spiritual matters. Also, most of the usages of the term Mubarak are in context that are related to the creation, whereas the usages of the term holy, muqaddas, is almost always in connection with activities of the creator. So that's kind of the difference between these two, and these are the two terms in the Quran that describe the. So I'm trying to switch to okay. That describe the Holy Land. These are the two terms. It is still special. It's not special in the sense of using the word blessed, because that's used in other places. But in terms of muqaddas, like I said, there are these two places mentioned, the Ard al-Muqaddasa, Palestine being, and the other place is where revelation was first given to Prophet Moses. Now, this is as far as description, that's all we can say. Anything, I'm trying to contain the discussion here so we don't mix two different things, Quran and non-Quran. So I'm trying to make this clear, and obviously anybody and everybody can then go out and then add to it, consult extra Quranic sources, etc., for what they say. Let's move now to a kind of the next topic. So we spoke about the description of the Holy Land. Now we're going to talk about the identification of this Holy Land. Where is it? I'm going to start first with the Bible. I'm going to read places where kind of identify. There are lots of passages in the Bible. I've chosen three of them. One of them, this comes from Genesis, very early in the Bible, Genesis 15, 18 to 21. Allah here, God is talking to Abraham. To your descendants, I give this land, and then it goes from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates.
Ah, yes.
That's quite some land, and this has significant implications, as I will get to later. And then after it says that, the Bible goes on to list 10 different peoples that are supposedly living in this area. Okay, some of these peoples were clearly living in places like Syria, so far from Palestine. So the descriptions, including not only the Canaanites, they are mentioned, but you've got the Amorites, and you've got other people, Kenizzites, etc. 10 of them. So the point I'm trying to make is that it's actually quite a large area, much bigger than Palestine. Another reference I would like to make here is from Exodus 22:31. And here God says, I will set your borders from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines. The Sea of the Philistines is the Mediterranean. And then goes on to say, and from the wilderness to the Euphrates. So it's talking effectively south to north, and then more or less west to east, kind of is describing them. I will set your borders from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness to the Euphrates. For I will hand over to you the inhabitants of the land. That's a nice way of putting it. And you shall drive them out before you. So it's really still kind of stressing the kind of huge area we're talking about. The last reference I'm going to mention here comes from Deuteronomy chapter 1, 6 to 8. And here God speaking again, saying, you have stayed long enough at this mountain. This is Horeb. Resume your journey and go into the hill country of the Amorites, as well as into neighboring regions. And then it mentions places, and then goes on to say, the land of the Canaanites and the Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates. So there's no really doubt about what we are talking about here, the scale and the size of the area. Now, I'd like to go back to the slide and show you one important slide. Right. So this is the biblical Holy Land. As you can see, I have actually used a map from a book by a famous dispensationalist called Clarence Larkin. The book was written in 1919. I've downloaded this from Wikipedia. If people would like to know where I've got it. I have just added those red lines to make it clearer to what the Holy Land, according to this gentleman, is. And as you can see, Palestine is actually a tiny bit on the west, but the land extends into Syria, Arabia, today's Iraq, and Syria, I don't know, it might be maybe a little bit of Turkey,
a bit of Egypt, a bit of Turkey, a bit of all of Lebanon, a bit of Jordan, if not all of Jordan, and so the list goes on. And I've heard people say this, the IDF and so on. This is not just about what we call Palestine. This is a land grab of geopolitical massive proportions, affecting many, many nations. Extraordinary.
This gentleman is dispensationalist. So
a Christian. This is a Christian Zionist, I
Oh
suppose.
yeah, sorry, yeah. So dispensationalist is like another kind of very related species to Zionists. And they are actually very related. They are very close to each other. Completely different agenda. At heart, they hate each other. Well, that's what it is. I mean, one group is actually Jewish mainly, but Christian Zionism, which really include these people who believe in dispensationalism, actually have a completely different agenda. Their belief at heart is actually very different. I did speak about this briefly in the presentation on the chosenness of the Israelites, who would like to go there and have a look at it. Obviously, these guys, the dispensationalists, divide history into 7 kind of eras, etc., what they call dispensations or administrations, etc. But we don't need to get into that for now. And if you look actually at their kind of, there are some pictorial representation of their thinking of these dispensation. If you look at them and some of these complex, sophisticated diagrams, you would think you'd be really forgiven for thinking these are the forerunners of AI. It's this complex, actually, what they think, the kind of theology really that I doubt anybody can claim to fully understand. But that's what they are. What matters for us is that they've been very influential. This book was written in 1919. That is when, obviously, the dispensationalist movement started by Nelson Darby, of course, in the late 19th century, and continued to gain support. And of course, what we're living today in terms of genocide, etc., is partly credited to this notorious movement, I would call it. Now, the issue that the reason I put this on the screen, and I did promise not to talk politics.
I think you just failed in that promise. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, yes. But because really I wanted, because ultimately what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to the Quran to talk about it's kind of what it says about the land, where it is, where it's located. So I wanted to make this contrast to make it clear, but also to make another point. And the point is very simple. Anybody who believes in the Bible has a really, really stark choice to make, because this land, this map, was never fulfilled in the past, ever. So there are 2 possibilities. Either this map is false, this will never happen, the Bible is simply wrong, repeatedly wrong, not once, not twice, repeatedly wrong. Or the Bible is correct. If it's correct, then we can kind of extrapolate from what happened with Palestine and conclude that Zionists will wipe out millions of people. Very simple.
They have to ethnically cleanse Iraq and Syria and Lebanon and Jordan and Egypt. I mean, this is obviously the sheerest fantasy. It's inconceivable that they could do this. So this is the unreality of this alleged idea.
Yes, I agree with you. I think what might well be real is the slaughter. So they might not get there because, as we speak, how many of these countries are being bombed by Israel? We know that. So they might not actually achieve this. It's unrealistic. However, I think the point I'm trying to make here is really for our kind of friends who believe in the Bible. And I'm trying to tell them there's a choice for you to make. Would you like to see more genocide? Would you like to see more ethnic cleansing, etc.? If that's what you want, that's what it means, actually, this plan. It cannot happen by sitting around the table and then everybody in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Israel, giving the land to the chosen people of America. Nobody would do that. So that's let's not just do more of that. What I would like to say now is probably stop this. So going back to the Quran, the Quran does not actually just that it's a style. It doesn't give those historical details in the same way it doesn't give names, etc. So it's no surprise that the Quran does not tell us where exactly that land. So if we wanted to kind of take a view on what the land might be, we will have to use extra Quranic sources and link them to what the Quran says. So opinions actually again differ. Some exegetes have mentioned the Mount of Sinai and its surroundings as the Holy Land. Jericho for some reason is mentioned specifically. I have no idea why. Most of these opinions, by the way, for those who don't know, exegetes often exegetes opinions of tabi'in, successors, and even in times actually Sahaba are often mentioned with no sanad, with no transmission. So most of the time we have an opinion. It's not like kutub of hadith, books of hadith. It's actually very different. It's just for people who are not aware of that. Another opinion is Sham, the Levant. Another opinion talks about Palestine, Syria, and parts of Jordan. At-Tabari, who died in 310 and who compiled actually some of the earliest opinion on this, he says it has to be a land between the Euphrates, the river Euphrates, and the Al-Arish or Arish. This is in Sinai, north of Sinai, a city called Arish. So it's between these two. He doesn't say exactly where. He says it has to be between these two. Why does he say that? Because the figures who are involved we in the Quran mention in the Quran, the prophets who are associated with this land are known to have lived there. In that particular, specifically in Palestine. So that's really, so what we're doing here, just to be clear, we're using extra Quranic information to take a view on, well, where this land might be. But there is in the Quran, there is no justification, not indeed according to history, to expand the location of the Holy Land beyond Palestine. So I'm talking not outside the Bible, I'm talking even in history, historically speaking. The Israelites, the Jews were never really kind of in charge of Syria, for instance. That never happened. So I would like now to just go back to the slides and show a different slide. So there's an opinion that some might come across at times. They try to confuse the definition of the Holy Land and make it completely unknowable, or link it with other lands, potentially even Arabia. There's some kind of outlandish opinions out there. So I wanted to present something here and try and show that's really not what the Quran is saying. It's difficult to link it to what the Quran says. So I'm going back to one of the verses I mentioned earlier, in which the word mubarak or barakna fiha, blessed, is mentioned, and this is about Abraham and Lot having been to that land, went to that land. And there are the three verses that follow this verse are significant. So they're all from the same chapter, as you can see at the end of each verse. This is referring to Abraham. وَوَهَبْنَا لَهُ إِسْحَاقَ وَيَعْقُوبَ نَافِلَةً وَكُلًّا جَعَلْنَا صَالِحِينَ. And we gave him Isaac and Jacob in addition, all of whom we made righteous. What's interesting here, and I'm sure a lot of brothers and sisters would have noticed this, but maybe not exactly spotted what's unique about it. The expression Ishaq wa Yaqub, Isaac and Jacob. This expression occurs 4 times in the Quran in the context of describing them as having been given to Abraham. Now, what's interesting here is that obviously Abraham also was the father of Ishmael. So why are they mentioned specifically? It's very simple, actually, because after leaving Mecca and going again to the Holy Land, that's when he had Ishaq, Isaac, and he also was alive when Jacob was born. So the mention of both of them as having been given to Abraham, is a reference to the fact that he actually lived long enough to actually see Yaqub as well, Isaac. And the reason that Ishmael is not mentioned here, because after he left Mecca, he didn't actually stay there to see Ishmael's sons, etc. There's no reference to that. In fact, there's a verse in which Prophet Abraham prays to Allah, where it says, "Inni askantu min dhurriyyati biwadin ghayri dhi zar'in 'inda baytika al-muharram." We have left living some of my descendants at your Baytuk al-Muharram, Bayt al-Haram. And then he asked for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to look after them, because he left them there, meaning Ishmael and his family there. And what we're talking about here is his family in the Holy Land. That's Isaac and Jacob. And I'm trying to just to show here that these 4 verses I'm going to show now, they actually all kind of make it clear that all these events are happening in the same place. Where did these prophets live? Away from Arabia. They lived actually in Palestine. So the other verse, and then it goes on, وَجَعَلْنَاهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْهِمْ فِعْلَ الْخَيْرَاتِ وَإِقَامَ الصَّلَاةِ وَإِيتَاءِ الزَّكَاةِ وَكَانُوا لَنَا عَابِدِينَ. And we made them leaders, guiding by our command, and we inspired to them the doing of good deeds, establishment of prayer, and giving of alms, and they were worshippers of us. I would like just to highlight something really interesting, significant here. See the word leaders. In Arabic, this is obviously in the plural. In Arabic is a'imma. It's the plural of the word imam.
Yeah.
Imam. Now, the reason I wanted to highlight this, because you can see cross-reference in the Quran is absolutely amazing. You're talking about a book whose verses were revealed over 20 years or so.
Yeah.
Now, so last time, I think it was, we did a presentation on the Abrahamic covenant. And in doing that, I referred to a particular verse as the Abrahamic covenant verse. And the verse talks about, I'm going to remind people of that verse. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ فَأَتَمَّهُنَّ قَالَ إِنِّي جَاعِلُكَ النَّاسِ إِمَامًا قَالَ وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي قَالَ لَا يَنَالُ عَهْدِيَ الظَّالِمِينَ. It's Al-Baqarah 2124, Paul, if you want to check. And it reads something like, and when Abraham was tried by his Lord with commands and he fulfilled them, he said, indeed, I will make you a leader for people. He said, and of my descendants, he said, my covenant does not include the wrongdoers.
My pledge, or as Abdul Halim has it, my pledge does not hold for those who do evil. So it's a conditional covenant. It's a caveat. It's not like an unbending, unrevocable promise for eternity. So yeah,
absolutely.
Very interesting.
And what's interesting here, Paul, is how this one, that's the promise to Abraham, is fulfilled here, and how this verse and the wording of this verse confirms the other verse, and how the other verse is worded, the condition you spoke about. He promised that he would make him a leader. He asked for descendants of his to be included, and he implied, yes, some of them, those who deserve to be leaders. And then you've got this verse here that effectively confirms what the other verse said. Al-Qur'an yusaddiqu ba'dahu ba'da. Quran confirms itself. That's what we're talking about here. And then the last verse here is that it goes then to Lot. وَلُوطًا آتَيْنَاهُ حُكْمًا وَعِلْمًا وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْقَرْيَةِ كَانَتْ تَعْمَلُ الْخَبَائِثَ إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا قَوْمَ سَوْءٍ فَاسِقِينَ. So, and to Lot we gave wisdom and knowledge, and we saved him from the town that was committing abominations. Indeed, we were people of, they were a people of evil. And what I'm highlighting here is Al-Qarya التي كانت تعمل الخبائث, etc., the town that is referred to. And if you look at the context of these four consecutive verses, clearly it's talking about all of them being in a more or less same area. What I'm trying to do here is really extract as much information as possible from a text that doesn't speak in detail. So I'm trying to show here that those four verses do confirm that there is no need to go outlandish with suggesting that the Holy Land was in Arabia or etc., or places that we actually don't know nothing about. Okay, let's move now to the subject of ownership of the land. We spoke about the geography, we spoke about how to identify the place. This is the question really on the lips of everybody these days. Who owns the land? Now, we know who stole the land, but the question, who rightfully should the land belong to? In the Bible, this is one passage, Genesis 17:8, and I will give to you, talking to Abram, and to your offspring after you, the land where you are now an alien, all the land of Canaan for perpetual holding, and I will be their God. So this theme is repeated many times in the Quran, that the ownership is perpetual. In the Quran, it's what I call temporary lease. It's not perpetual.
So you're saying in the Bible it's perpetual. In other words, there is no limit to it in terms of ownership, but the Quran doesn't endorse this perpetual, unending ownership claim.
No, it doesn't. So the Quran talks about.
It's an important distinction. So in a way, the Quran is correcting the Bible. In that regard.
So in the Quran, the question of ownership and right to it has been used because the Quran says, التي كتب الله لكم. When Moses took the Israelites out of Egypt, he described the land as the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has assigned to you. كتب لكم. Some people, Christian, Jews, but also actually some Muslims have jumped on this verse to say, well, the Quran itself says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given this land to the Israelites. So what are you bothered about? You should just leave it, give it to the Israelites. And this is, of course, a complete distortion and at best misunderstanding of what the Quran says. The Quran uses the word kataba, ordained, something like that, assigned. The word kataba in the Quran, or ordained, comes in two different meanings. One of them means commandments. And these commandments may or may not be followed. So they are optional. They are not forced on somebody. So for instance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the fasting, and he says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, kutiba alaykum as-siyam. Fasting has been decreed or preordained, decreed upon you. Now, does this mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying everybody's gonna fast? Of course not. So the concept of decree, a divine decree, it occurs often to mean something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered, commanded the creatures to do, but they may or may not do. It's not nothing to do with timeline, whether it's perpetual, not perpetual. That's not what it means. It just basically means I have decided that you should be doing this. Whether you do it or not is a different matter. There's another verse, but also it occurs in context where it describes things that are effectively permanent. For instance, there's a verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, كَتَبَ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ الرَّحْمَةِ. He preordained mercy upon himself. He described himself as merciful. So he preordained mercy upon himself. And there are other places that in the Quran that I can cite here, but they give you the same meaning. So the fact that the land was described as kutiba, kataba Allahu lakum, as ordained, preordained, or decreed for you, does not imply that this is perpetual simply because of that one verb. But there's something actually even more kind of common sense here. We all know that the Israelites did not actually live in that land perpetually anyway. I mean, Abraham went first there, that's what the Bible says, and then he left to go to Egypt. In the beginning, he was a sojourner, so he was just not integrated, not kind of permanently living there. Then he went to Egypt, came back to the Holy Land, and then he stayed there. But then we also know that the Israelites were in Egypt. We know for hundreds of years. We know that even after they left Egypt, they were kind of, stayed in the wilderness for 40 years. So they did not go into the Holy Land immediately. We know they, most of the time, they were not actually in the Holy Land. They were expelled in 722, of course. That's when the northern kingdom of Israel was removed by Sargon II, the Assyrians, and then in 586, 597, 586 as well, but 586 is really the big one, is when the southern kingdom of Judah was also destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar II, the new Babylonian king. Of course, another well-known event is that after the Second Jewish War in 135 CE, now we're talking now CE, the Roman Emperor Hadrian expelled the Jews from Aelia Capitolina, I think, as he called it, expelled them, and they were outside Jerusalem for half a millennium, so 500 years. It was the Muslims, of course, who invited them back. More specifically, it was Khalifa Umar bin al-Khattab who actually invited back the Jews. If the Muslims had continued the tradition of the Christians, the Jews would never come back to the Holy Land. But that's not what happened. Also, I would like also to say that Umar's action, there's something called Al-Uhda Al-Umariyya, or the Umar's covenant or treaty with the Christians there, that effectively, ultimately, it was all peaceful, of course, when the Muslims conquered Jerusalem. It shows that when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam expelled some Jews from their cities, their towns in Arabia. Those were specific actions for specific aggressions by specific people. It was not a policy to get rid of each and every Jew there. And of course, Jews continue to live in many places there. Had Umar believed that the Prophet ﷺ, or witnessed the Prophet ﷺ expelling everybody and not allowing anybody to live there, why would he actually allow them back? There would have been no reason for him to do that. So that's kind of side point to mention. Now, the other point that I wanted to talk about is the concept of, because it's linked to the Holy Land. The Holy Land is, of course, according to the Bible, is for the holy people. So the Holy Land goes to the holy people. There are a couple of, and of course, the Bible itself is a really history, a book of history and theology. But the Israelites are the holy people that are at the center of that book, of that history and its focus. A couple of passages to remind everybody here.
Can I just pause there? From my understanding in the past, that there's a sense of the holy people of God in the Jewish Bible, meaning those who are set apart for God. That's one of the senses what holiness means. That they're not part of the nations, they're not part of those who do not follow God. They are set apart as God's special possession, and to obey Him, so fulfill the conditions of the covenant. So there's no such thing as like kind of as static Israelites who are just blessed because their DNA or their ethnic identity or their label is X. They are this conditional upon them obeying God's commandments, which are the 613 commandments given by God to Moses, of course, on Mount Sinai.
Yeah,
so it's very conditional, this, and they're set apart. So they're not acting the part if they're not showing gratitude, they're not obeying, they're not fulfilling their side of the covenant, and so on and so forth. Then they are choosing death. To choose life or choose death, says God in Deuteronomy chapter 20, I think, 22.
I think what you have, Paul, because the Bible is a set of diverse books. You have a number of effectively conflicting, competing statements. So if you go back to Genesis, the Genesis emphasis is actually the absolute ownership, the absolute choosing of the people. In fact, it goes out of its way to stress that they had nothing special about them. They had absolutely nothing. It just, the term used usually is love. Just God loved them. Then you move to Exodus, and then you have the verses there start talking about the law, which then is confirmed again in Deuteronomy. And when you get into the details of the law, things get a lot more complex, because now what is the point of any law? Any law is there to be implemented, to be fulfilled. And when you get there, you end up with this kind of really tug of war between the concept of chosenness being completely detached from anything else and the concept of chosenness being conditional. And then this actually also got into very much into Christian kind of polemics here. And it was linked, of course, with the concept of grace in Christianity, whether the law is needed or not. And in fact, just to show, just kind of even a little bit, we're diverging here from what we're talking about. If you look at somebody like Sanders, E.P. Sanders, if you deal with how he actually dealt with this concept, and of course, he actually ended up trying to say and show that the concept of grace was already in Judaism. It wasn't actually introduced but the point I'm trying to make is that you can see even among modern scholars, there's this tendency and kind of to try and bridge a gap really that exists between a variety of texts. Paul himself, as you know, Paul, is very much conflicted about the law. and what the law does or doesn't. And ultimately, justification is justification by grace or is just justification by works. And this has been an ongoing debate, and it probably will never, ever be settled. But the bottom line of all of this, why don't we have a similar debate in Islam? Why? Just let's think of, just stop for a moment and think. The Quran was revealed over 22 years or something. So it's actually a long period of time, relatively speaking. But it's the consistency of its theology and its message. It never meant that anybody would come and say something. Anybody would say, well, you know, you go to paradise, but just being kind of a nice Muslim at heart. This doesn't work. It doesn't. Nobody would actually buy that. I'm not saying nobody has said it ever, because there is no stupid idea that hasn't found somebody to say. So it must have been said by somebody, but it's completely nobody, you know, in their right kind of mind would conclude that. Whereas when it comes to the Bible, no, it's actually a very, very serious issue, and it kind of cuts across both theologies, Jewish as well as Christian theology. So, and the other thing is that I wanted to say that even though this concept of a holy ethnicity is so kind of day-to-day concept, it really is so, and it sounds so, and it looks so, because the Western mind has been conditioned to see it this way. And because of that, they're born with it. They don't actually realize how illogical, inconsistent, and really outright weird it really is. A very weird idea. That partly why Christianity, of course, replaced it. So replaced this ethnic chosenness with supersessionism, or so Christian, the church superseded Israel, or the Christians are spiritual Israel, whereas the Israelites, ancient Israelites, are the ethnic Israel, etc. All of that, like I said, we spoke about it in an earlier video. In the Quran, there is no holy people. We don't have this concept. No. There's one, I think, a video we did on the chosenness of the Israelites, where I spoke about the concept of best nation, khayru ummah. Khayru ummah in the Quran is a concept that exists, but it really refers to that very specific idea, talking about the combination of faith, iman wa amal salih, faith and good works. That's what it is. And it actually specifically mentions Jews, Christians, etc., others. Anybody can become part of khayru ummah. There's nothing holy about it, and definitely it does not kind of introduce any concept that in any way kind of brings any concept of, let's say, divinity to these people, etc. Given that the word muqaddas we spoke about earlier is actually kind of quite connected with Allah's activity, but the concept of holy people does not exist. There are, of course, honorable groups mentioned in the Quran, prophets being one of them, Muslims, believer, pious people, etc. But they all boil down to the same thing: belief and good works. So what the Quran talks about then, ultimately, is very simple. The Quran talks about a holy land, but no holy people. That's a very significant difference. If you think about it, a summary for what the Quran talks about: a holy land, but no holy people. So there's one particular kind of subtlety here that I would like to talk about quickly. One of the verses I mentioned earlier, it's about Abraham and Lot being taken, rescued to the al-ard allati barakna fiha lil-alamin, and we delivered him, Abraham and Lot, to the land that we have blessed for the world, al-alamin. So the Quran didn't say it's for the Jews or Israelites or Arabs or whatever.
What was the verse again? Sorry, I missed the...
So this is 2171.
2171. Okay.
2171, Surah Al-Anbiya, the prophets.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Can I just read the Abdul Halim translation, which is pretty much the same as yours. We saved him and Lot and sent them to the land we blessed for all people. For all people.
Yeah, yeah.
A very important point. No?
Exactly. It's one word, but you see, that's the Quran. It's absolutely amazing. It's one word, but there's so much information that's being conveyed by this one single word. Now, because, and that's very important, the verse could have ended after Barakna fiha, we blessed. It could have ended there. But no, the verse has this extra very significant word that means a lot. Umar's action, when he allowed the Jews back, confirms the understanding in this verse that this is a land that's supposed to be for everybody. But how can it be for everyone when obviously whoever lives there, it would have to be a small number of people living there. And that takes me back to the video we did on the chosenness of Israel, when I spoke about the purpose of the chosenness of Israel, or the meaning of that chosenness is choosing the Israelites to be the kind of protectors of the message of monotheism throughout history. That was the function. And I would go on and say having a holy land, which obviously at some point had the temple there at two different stages, that actually created a focal point to which those people who were charged with the responsibility and privilege to carry this tradition, the Prophet's tradition of monotheism, of their message to everybody, that helped them, that land helped them to stay as some kind of community in whatever form. Of course, they spread everywhere, other people got mixed with them, etc. But then when they went back, they continued to live in the same way. And that connection, and I'm trying to say here that the concept of Holy Land here, it was holy over the centuries, played a role actually in helping the Israelites perform that role of maintaining that tradition of the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it was like a gathering, remained like a gathering line, the focal point. Now, okay, so that's what it did in the past. So what about today? Right. Today, the land remains holy, of course, to the Jews, to the Christians and Muslims because of its history. It's not because, of course, so the land, nobody thinks of Palestine and thinks of archaeology and rocks and whatever. Of course, it's historical sites, etc. We don't think of it. We think of the history that was once there. We think of the prophets who were there. We think of the land that Jesus walked one day, etc. That's why we look at it and think about it as a place of religious and spiritual sites. But that will never end. It will always be that history that we cherish and all of us love. The point I'm trying to make here is really to not conflate the historical significance with its historical function. The historical significance, so it will always be holy to us, place we love, etc., respect, revere, but its function is gone. The function that once it had is no more. As I again explained in the previous video, the ultimate commissioning of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam ended the Israelites' role as the custodians of the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, I don't want to get through things we've already covered there, but the new book, the pure and protected book, the new prophet, etc., there was no more for anybody to carry, anyone else to continue that historical responsibility. Now Prophet Muhammad is there, the Quran was there, and that took care of maintaining and protecting and spreading, of course, the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, we have, as Muslims, we have Mecca. And Mecca is the place that has the house of God, where we go to visit for Hajj, we go for Umrah, and it is very important. But it does not play the role that was played by the Holy Land historically with the Israelites in order to maintain that message of oneness. What I mean by that, Islam has no borders, and Islam is beyond any borders. Islam is a universal message. It's gone everywhere. Nobody can undo it. Doesn't matter. People can be as Islamophobic as they like. They're going to get nowhere. So Islam isn't going to be contained. Nobody can contain it. Nobody can undo history. So, but this is like a subtle point I really wanted to confirm here, because from the Quranic point of view, Zionists cannot use history to claim ownership of the land today, even theologically speaking. Theologically speaking, it actually doesn't have that function anymore. It's not needed to be the center. And of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted this holy land to be the land of blessing for all people, not the exclusive paradise for one particular ethnic group, but the source of this not become a source of indescribable and really uncountable deaths and suffering for the rest of humanity. It's just as bad as and unfortunate as it is. So, just to recap on what we discussed, the Holy Land, the Palestine in the Quran, described with two terms, as mubaraka, blessed, and also as muqaddasa, or holy. And it refers to Palestine. If we use other information, historical information, we can confirm that refers to Palestine. There's no concept of an extended, huge land as mentioned in the Bible. Again, contrary to the Bible, the land was given to the Israelites. It was more of a temporary lease, not permanent ownership, not perpetual. Also, contrary to the Bible, there is no concept of holy people in the Quran. The special function of the Holy Land ended with the end of the role of the Israelites as the custodians of the message of monotheism. If there's anything else you would like me to expand on, discuss more, etc.
I think, I mean, for me, one of the many things that are very interesting about what you said is the Quran's role vis-a-vis the scriptures of the people of the book, be they Christians or Jews, particularly the Jewish part in this case, as a corrective, as to restate the truth about any given matter, and this is a much deeper response to the oft-repeated missionary claim that somehow the Quran endorses the Bible. But in fact, we see in the deep engagement, the intertextuality, as it's called, of the Quran and the Bible, the way it very subtly corrects or gives the correct information or new information, or rejects false claims, like where the Bible may say that God tires, or on the seventh day he needed to rest or something. That's explicitly countered. So I think the subtlety of the Quran very often in its critique or correction of the Bible is very, very interesting, and it has been noted by Western scholars big time in the last 20-30 years. People like Professor Nikolai Sina at Oxford, who's not a Muslim, and many others. This is now a very standard view. So that old simplistic trope you got from Orientalists and about a cut and paste job of none of this works now. Because why? Because people are listening and paying attention very carefully to what the Quran is actually saying. And as soon as you do that, it discloses all of these marvels, all these extraordinary subtle interactions with the Bible.
What used to happen is scholars from the time of John of Damascus, and all of them, all the way down to Geiger in the 19th century, Nordecke, etc. All of these people, what they used to do is to look at the kind of general headlines of a story or an account. And what they do deliberately, because they were not idiots, they were really, really highly intelligent, but selectively. And what they do, they ignore the differences. And those differences are often so significant that really stop you there. And they make you wonder, well, hold on. First of all, how did Muhammad get this right? Why would Muhammad do that? Why would he, if he's copying, I don't know how, this much detail, why would he change this little bit here, little bit there, little bit there? At times, those changes are also subtle. So it's not like even shouting, come and see what up. If they are not, and then you study and study, and then one day it hit you and say, wow, look at that. This is really quite different. That's not, I didn't expect that. I didn't see it first time around. Well, how did this happen? So it's the change, the move from looking at the commonalities only to looking at the differences as well that change this attitude.
Or saying that when the Quran differs in the Bible, the Quran's made a mistake, without actually thinking, well, maybe the Quran is correcting the Bible, obviously. So there was this kind of superior supremacist attitude towards other religions as well. We're Christians, we know the truth. And so just not taking seriously what the Quran is saying in its own terms. And that is largely gone, I think, from the Western Academy now, about the Quran, I mean.
Yeah. So what we're talking about is a growing gap between lay people and academics.
Yeah. True.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's a fascinating subject, and you've spoken at length, not just on this video, but other videos, about precisely this, what the scholars call intertextuality, and it's a deeply interesting subject, and it discloses such riches, such gems, you call them, in the Quran, which are often not appreciated because we're not making this intertextual analysis, which you've done so well. So thank you very much indeed for this. And what you said today, of course, is much more than just that. It speaks to the whole issue of this ownership of the Holy Land by one particular people, regardless of what they do, that they can do what the hell they like. The emphasis on the word hell there, and it's ongoing. Truly shocking, truly beyond what we're all speechless at what is continuing to happen. But anyway, thank you very much indeed, Dr. Louay Fatoohi, as always, for your meticulous scholarship. And it's always a pleasure to hear you and to look up the verses and see what you're saying. Fantastic work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much.
Until next time, inshallah.